Yes. Good evening, everybody. Hope you are having a fantastic week. Hope you had a wonderful weekend as well. We are going to get into some boxing, of course, and there's a lot to discuss. I've got to keep it real with you. There are not too many great fights coming up this weekend. It's not the best weekend of action. There is a Mauricio Lara fight. There is also a Hyun Mi Choi fight that is the female junior lightweight champion. Basically, the person who's holding the other belt, or should I say the only belt that Alicia Bumgarner does not hold. So today, some of the news that's broken, we're going to get into as well. I'm just going to kind of breeze through some of the headlines first. But Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora looks like it's reportedly happening on December 3rd. Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall 2. Finally looks like it's about to be scheduled because this has costed Josh Taylor 3 of his 4 belts. And it looks like they are finally going to make that happen for February 4th. Man, he's going to have been out of the ring for like 14 months by that time. Wow. Well, it looks like Taylor versus Catarall 2, February 4th. David Benavidez looks like he has his next opponent lined up, and it's going to be former IBF champion Jose Uzcategui. You might remember that's the guy who Caleb Plant initially beat to capture the IBF belt. Benavidez versus Uzcategui is probably going to happen in January. Troy Williamson versus Josh Kelly. That looks like it's going to take place on December 2nd. John Ryder, that's the guy who got the win over Daniel Jacobs and who really pushed Callum Smith before that. A lot of people, including myself, thought that John Ryder deserved the decision win over Callum Smith. Well, that same John Ryder is about to take on Zach Parker. Remember, that's the fight that Demetrius Andre was going to be involved with. Well, Demetrius Andre, because he was going to get paid so little compared to what he was going to make in that same fight just a few months prior, he stepped aside. John Ryder versus Zach Parker is about to take place for the for the interim WBO title. And then Dillian Whyte looks like he has his next opponent lined up, and that will be Jermaine Franklin. They say that they are close to securing a deal. Again, Dillian Whyte versus Jermaine Franklin. If that does take place, I know most of us are like, who? But that looks like it's going to take place in November 26th, and that's pretty much a welcome back fight for Dillian Whyte, who's coming off of the knockout loss versus Tyson Fury. And then maybe most notably out of these fight, announcements, aside from maybe the Josh Taylor and Tyson Fury ones, Triple G, it looks like he's going to be fighting Falcao. Like you guys, okay, so Falcao, he's a pretty good middleweight, undefeated middleweight, and has actually beaten a good enough fighter, Azamov, whose only 2 losses before losing to Falcao were to Billy Joe Saunders and Demetrius Andre. It looks like the WBA and IBF have kind of made a joint ruling to order Triple G versus Falcao for both the Triple G's belts, the WBA and IBF middleweight belts. And then Arislandi Lara would then face the winner of Triple G versus Falcao. So, as I mentioned, okay, last weekend was probably one of the most active weekends on the boxing calendar, right? We had Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall, Devin Haney versus George Kambosos 2, Wilder versus Helenius, Michaela Mayer, Alicia Bumgarner, and Caleb Plant versus Anthony Dirrell. Those are pretty much the most meaningful fights that took place. I get that Emmanuel Rodriguez beat Gary Antonio Russell, not Gary Antoine, not Gary Russell Jr., but the smaller one, Gary Antonio Russell. But let's get into some of the recaps and some of the action that took place last weekend. So we had Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. And this was, at least betting odds-wise, about as close to 50-50 as you can get. And Clarissa Shields, yes, she won the fight. Yes, I think that she, won either 6 or 7 rounds in that fight. This was To be honest, she did better than I thought she was going to do. I did pick her to edge a decision, but I didn't think she was going to win this many rounds that looked somewhat clear-cut. I thought that it was important for her to get off to a good start against Marshall. She was fighting in, at the O2 Arena. So I knew that this was going to be a very pro-Savannah Marshall crowd and that it was going to be important for Clarissa Shields to pretty much assert herself and to demonstratively show that she's winning the fight. So it was a very competitive fight, but I was so impressed by Clarissa Shields' defense. I knew that in the fights that she had had in the past, she had exhibited very good defense, but then I was thinking, okay, well, this fight against Savannah Marshall is going to be a huge step up from the Haney rankings and, the different people that Clarissa Shields has fought in the past. And Savannah Marshall, to her credit, is a better fighter than those other opponents. But man, she was still having trouble landing cleanly on Clarissa Shields. Now, when she did land, it apparently did damage. Clarissa Shields said that for more than half of this fight, she couldn't see out of one of her eyes. So we all know Savannah Marshall packs a very unusually hard punch. But Clarissa Shields, even in the moments during the second half of the fight, where she started to get, walked back into the ropes, you would notice that as Savannah Marshall was throwing her, she would throw the jab hand, then go for that hard right hand, then come with the left hook. Clarissa Shields was either partially blocking or rolling with many of these Savannah Marshall punches. That was pretty, I knew that Clarissa Shields was a good defender. I didn't know that her head movement and trunk movement was this good to where she could anticipate the punch patterns that were coming to where, Savannah Marshall throws a right lead and she might duck the right lead or she might duck the left hook and then pull back and make Savannah Marshall miss with the right hand. She was doing this in even the problematic periods of the rounds where you're thinking, man, Clarissa Shields better get off the ropes if she wants to, stay lucid during this fight. Well, she did that. And again, I had her winning 7 rounds. I could understand 6 rounds to 4. I can also understand perhaps 5 rounds to 5. I don't think a strong argument could be made that Savannah Marshall won the fight. But it was a very close and competitive fight. And, I get that when Clarissa Shields declares herself the greatest woman of all time, a lot of people, take issue with her, with her attitude and with her supreme confidence. But if we're going to isolate that term, that phrase, GWOAT, she's certainly in the discussion. So today, I couldn't in good conscience put her any lower than number 2, pound for pound in female boxing. The others that you could make an argument for would obviously be Katie Taylor. So those who would say no to Clarissa Shields would probably have Katie Taylor in that number 1 spot. But I can't put both Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano above Clarissa Shields. So wherever you would place her in the top 3, it might vary. But for me, no less than number 2, maybe number 3. I mean, she now has, she's beaten Christina Hammer. She's beaten Savannah Marshall. She's beaten the current, Franchon Cruz Dezern, who I think's only loss is still to Clarissa Shields. I have to double check that, but she's currently the champion, 2 divisions up from Clarissa Shields. So yeah, very impressive fight. To me, this was her most impressive performance. I thought that she would have to have her most impressive fight in order to win this one, and in my opinion, she did. So let's get into Devin Haney versus George Kambosos 2. This was kind of the rematch that nobody was asking for. Most people saw what we felt we needed to see in their first fight. And that was basically Devin Haney looking like he won by, 9 rounds to 3, thereabouts? Well, in this rematch, you could argue that this was even more dominant than that first Devin Haney win. And, I don't know if it told us anything that we didn't already know about Devin Haney, but there was there was room for error. There was room to come in unmotivated, to, potentially miss weight. If you are constantly having trouble making lightweight, then you have to pretty much put in the same preparation for this rematch that you had to put in, for all of the lightweight fights prior. So I guess some of the takeaways from this could be that Devin Haney is a true professional, that he is the sweet scientist that we all, more or less knew him to be, and that even when there doesn't seem to be a motivating factor to get totally up for the fight, to me, Devin Haney was as sharp here as he's ever looked. I don't think he was any less in this fight than he was for the Jojo Diaz or Linares fights, or than he was from the first fight against George Kambosos. I think that he outperformed his first performance against Kambosos. I kind of thought that the opposite was going to happen. I thought Devin Haney was going to win the fight, but I thought George Kambosos was going to make this more competitive. I thought that he was going to win, noticeably win more than, let's say, 3 rounds, where right now, I don't think you could make the argument that Kambosos won more than 3 rounds. I think that 3 is the high side that you could give him. I think that you might have been able to give him the first round, might have been able to give him the 12th round. Anything outside of that, for me, it would be difficult to give to Kambosos. So, yeah, Devin Haney was clicking on all cylinders, and it's interesting. You saw Kambosos try to come in with a different game plan. We saw him switching stances. We saw him kind of doing different feints to try to set up a big left hook or something close, something close to it. Basically, 1 or 2 big power punches at a time. And yes, those are dangerous punches that you have to look out for. But to Devin Haney's credit, he did get hit by some right hands, but he wasn't getting faked out by this new approach that George Kambosos was taking. So, I think that this might have been Devin Haney's best performance. The question is, where does he now go from here? It looks like if Vasily Lomachenko takes care of business against Jermaine Ortiz, that the next fight that you would have to line up would be Devin Haney versus Vasily Lomachenko. And that is if Devin Haney agrees to try to make weight for this, another 35-pound fight, which Devin Haney keeps on suggesting that he's having difficulty making. I do think that if Lomachenko is lined up as his next opponent, he'll find that additional motivation to make weight and to fight Vasily Lomachenko. Personally, I think that this is one of those legacy boosters where even if you've already become undisputed in the division, Lomachenko would by far be the best guy that you fought. And it's arguably as meaningful, if not more meaningful, than just about anybody that you are going to fight right now at 140. So I think that it would be worth Devin Haney taking this final fight, if you will, at lightweight, just so he could face the legend, Vasily Lomachenko. And, I don't know how you would feel about Haney versus Lomachenko or who you would favor in that one. QT, what's going on? Heck yeah. Good to hear from you. Thank you for coming through. And by the way, let me know who you think would win right now between Devin Haney and Vasily Lomachenko. A year ago, 2 years ago, I would have probably gone with Lomachenko. Devin Haney is looking big for the division right now. Lomachenko's never been a big 135. He's a pretty strong one, but he's never been a big one. With a Loma, yeah, so a victory over Loma, I think, unless Devin Haney's career just falls off of a cliff after beating Lomachenko, I think that if he, does it make him a lock for the Hall of Fame? The there is an argument that could be made that Devin Haney, if he beats Lomachenko, having already become undisputed, defended undisputed, and then beating Lomachenko, damn, yeah, he might in that case have already secured a Hall of Fame spot by the age of 23. But let me ask you this. What happens if he beats Lomachenko, then goes up to 140, and loses his first fight at 140, goes to 140 and loses his first fight. And let's say, just for the sake of argument, he gets knocked out in his 140-pound debut. And then he comes back, maybe wins a fight, but never secures a 140-pound title, and then starts showing like degradation in his abilities and stuff. So if he basically becomes a shot fighter 2 to 3 fights after securing the victory against Lomachenko, would that hurt his Hall of Fame standing? Basically, can you earn Hall of Fame resume and then lose it in the ring? I think that the answer is maybe. You know, if he falls off, like, let's say, like Roy Jones fell off in his late 30s, something like that. I think you could earn Hall of Fame status and then lose Hall of Fame status. But if he beats Lomachenko, he's definitely on a clean path, barring some sort of something really bad where he just falls off a cliff, fight over fight in the short term. Yeah, he would be on the road to the Hall of Fame, and it would certainly be his most meaningful win. And I really want to see how Lomachenko looks at 35 years of age in this next fight against Jermaine Ortiz. I think he's still 34, but I know he's like in his mid-30s now. Jermaine Ortiz, if anything, he's a pretty athletic fighter. If Lomachenko is even still the Lomachenko that beat Nakatani and Kome, I think he should have his way more or less against Jermaine Ortiz. If he's showing slippage, I think Jermaine Ortiz is the type of fighter who can outfight, given his athleticism and pretty good punching ability, can beat an aging veteran. But I don't think that I don't expect Lomachenko's skills to have eroded so dramatically in such a small period of time. Now, granted, I don't know how he's been living. I don't know what he's been doing in Ukraine. I don't know what his lifestyle has been like. I know he takes awesome care of himself, but we really don't know. But I expect him to more or less be the same Loma, at least for this next fight against Jermaine Ortiz. Basso Man or Basso Man or Basso Man. I know I had gotten it right the last time. We'll go with Basso Man and tell me if that's not it. What's going on? Thank you for coming through. Yeah, styles make fights, and Lomachenko's style could be the most complicated in Haney's career. So I think it's going to take Haney a lot to figure out what Lomachenko's doing. However, those early rounds, now I get it, Lomachenko was reportedly, dealing with an injury when he fought Teofimo Lopez. But I'm just thinking of how big Teofimo Lopez looked in the ring against Lomachenko, and the way that now Teofimo Lopez is a more dangerous puncher than Devin Haney. Granted, that has to be acknowledged, and I think that played into the tentative nature that Lomachenko fought those first few rounds, where he was very apprehensive in how he was going to enter the pocket. I don't think he'll have to have that same trepidation when coming in against Devin Haney. Devin Haney doesn't have that put your lights out power that Teofimo Lopez does, at least at 135, right? It still remains to be seen how strong of a puncher Teo is going to be at 140, but at 135. But I do think I can picture Devin Haney looking really big against Loma and at least being able to control a sizable portion of the action behind the jab. Now, he's obviously going to have to put some things behind the jab, and he's going to have to take chances. But I feel like even if Devin Haney fights in a conservative way, it's going to be on Lomachenko to make an adjustment. Basically, I think that the first person who's going to have to make an adjustment, I actually think it's going to be Loma and not Haney, given Haney's size and just the physical properties, his size and reach. If we think about the lightweights that Lomachenko's fought, Luke Campbell, tall, big lightweight, right? So he's a tall one. Linares, kind of average height for the division. Anthony Corolla, he fought him too. Comey is pretty good size. He's now at 140, as is, Pedraza. Nakatani, another big lightweight. So, okay, Lomachenko has fought some tall lightweights. Nakatani, I don't think nobody's gonna mistake his boxing acumen with Devin Haney. So again, if Devin Haney kind of keeps it on the outside and tries to fight the first 3 rounds conservatively behind a jab, I think it's gonna look a little bit like Lopez versus Lomachenko's first 3 rounds. The question is, once Lomachenko gets cooking, because I think that when he fought Nakatani, Loma was cooking by the 3rd or 4th round. They suffered the headbutt that cut Lomachenko's either his eye or on his head. So there were a couple things that kind of set him back a bit. But I thought that he was pretty much flowing by the 4th or 5th round. I wouldn't be surprised if Haney looks like he's winning the first few rounds, which will make the middle rounds very interesting. I'm just trying to think of what Lomachenko would do in the first 2 to 3 rounds to seize control of the minute-by-minute action. Now, granted, as they start sweating, as they start getting tired, as they start, throwing more power punches behind the jabs, I think that's where the fight takes place, because that's when Lomachenko is going to have more and more opportunities to line Devin Haney up for the left hands, the straight lefts, to kind of catch him with that little sweeping, very fast right hook that he throws. And sometimes he'll throw that as a lead. Man, I really want to see that fight. If Lomachenko beats Jermaine Ortiz. But yeah, I think that the first person that would have to make the adjustment is Loma. But there's no guarantee in any of this. But Devin Haney is very much looking like a super well-rounded, solid boxer. And he obviously showed that against Kambosos in the rematch. By the way, I get that after losing these back-to-back fights against Haney, people are going to write Kambosos off. But, what do you think about Kambosos just overall? Do you think that he beats any of the other top lightweights? For instance, what would happen in a Ryan Garcia versus George Kambosos fight? We know George Kambosos likes to collapse the pocket. Would Ryan Garcia be able to just keep him out on the perimeter and stop this from becoming a very even fight, or or would he be able to just knock George Kambosos out, perhaps? What do you think would happen in a Ryan Garcia versus Kambosos fight? I think fill in the blank with another top lightweight. Basically, how much does this reset your opinion of George Kambosos? Garcia by KO, says Stan Tucker. So you don't think that Kambosos could make it an exciting, entertaining fight over the course of several rounds? Do you think that he gets hit in the middle rounds, early rounds? Because, we saw Fortuna. Fortuna is much smaller than George Kambosos. Ryan Garcia obviously has that hair trigger quick, left hook, and he was able to show us that straight right hand. Remember how he was easily just tapping Fortuna, just throwing that right hand at will? Ryan Garcia is showing some improvement in his all-around game, which is a problem for the opposition. But, okay, so we've got Garcia via KO over Kambosos. Yeah, so I'm just curious what you guys think in terms of how much this resets your opinion of George Kambosos, or does it just reinforce what you already thought about George Kambosos before he upset Teofimo Lopez? Benji Tucker says he agrees. Ryan by KO. Garcia for QT too. And QT was impressed by Ryan Garcia in his last fight. Yeah, so was I. He gave Fortuna nothing in that fight. So Devin, and who do you guys think would win? Just first, your gut feeling between Devin Haney and Vasily Lomachenko, assuming Lomachenko beats Jermaine Ortiz. And while you guys answer that one, by the way, I want to talk just a little bit about Deontay Wilder's first-round knockout of Robert Helenius. So this was obviously the return of the Bronze Bomber. Most people thought that he was going to knock Helenius out. I don't think we necessarily thought he was going to knock him out in the first round with the first clean punch that he landed up top. And tell me if you saw this too. I saw Deontay Wilder throwing right hands to the body. I thought that was a good sign. And I also think that it's a possibility that maybe Deontay Wilder, under the tutelage of Malik Scott, maybe he has gotten better at boxing, incrementally, not dramatically, but just incrementally. And maybe we just weren't able to tell because he was fighting Tyson Fury. In the same way, and I said this in the Wilder Helenius recap, same way that Anthony Joshua might really be improving as an all-around boxer, but not enough to really display how good of a sweet science technical boxer you are against a guy like Alexander Usyk. So it's going to be very interesting to see these next couple of fights for Deontay Wilder to play out. So he was moving around the ring against, Robert Helenius. Robert Helenius was patiently stalking Wilder as Wilder moved pretty well laterally, right? Controlled range. He wasn't throwing a popping jab. Like, I would like to see Deontay Wilder, pop a jab more often, where the guy's like, damn, I don't want to get hit by that repeatedly. But he was kind of probing with the jab, obviously trying to set up the bomb, right? But as much as we've already known about Deontay Wilder's punching power, it's still pretty astounding when you see the reality play out. When it's like, yes, this guy can literally touch you with the right hand and, majority of the time, knock out everybody but Tyson Fury, basically. He has knocked out every other fighter he has ever fought professionally, other than the Gypsy King, and he knocked the Gypsy King down 4 times in 2 fights, and 4 times over the course of 3 fights, right? But Deontay Wilder, I'm starting to shorten the list of the hardest punchers of all time. And yes, it is kind of a one-handed punch, right? There are other 2-fisted punchers. But I don't think boxing history has ever seen a punch harder than Deontay Wilder's right hand. Again, we knew what he had coming into this fight. It didn't make it any less dramatic or unbelievable when you see the first right hand that he lands in the first round against Helenius, and then you see Helenius flat on his back, motionless, with his eyes wide open. That it's pretty unbelievable. And if I was gonna give Andy Ruiz an edge prior, to this comeback from Deontay Wilder, or maybe after, Wilder versus Fury 2, as bad as Wilder looked in that total destruction, that one-sided destruction, right? And then we saw, Andy Ruiz looking, beating Anthony Joshua. And then some people were saying, I would take Andy Ruiz over Deontay Wilder. I mean, does this performance have you second-guessing that, assuming that you would have taken Ruiz in the first place? I just see this outsized punching power. And here's another thing. Deontay Wilder came in, he weighed into this fight at like 215 pounds, around 214 pounds to be specific. So he's under 220, well under 220. Helenius came in at 255. And nowhere else but the heavyweight division do you get 40-pound discrepancies. And you have these weight classes for a reason. So, like, just imagine Gervonta Davis knocking out somebody 40 pounds bigger than him. Or Ryan Garcia. Or Canelo Alvarez, which, I mean, we've seen close with Canelo. But no, not quite. 175 Kovalev and 160, that's a 15-pound discrepancy. Deontay Wilder is knocking out guys 40, 50 pounds bigger than him. Often with, like, the first clean punch that he lands. I mean, in that rematch against Luis Ortiz, he lost just about every round of that fight until he touched him with the right hand and it was lights out. Can you cite, and I know that the names that people bring up as like the heaviest punchers in boxing history, Ernie Terrell, George Foreman, sometimes Mike Tyson, and so forth. Drew Lewis is in the house. I'm sorry, Majin the artist. Sorry for blowing your spot. Edward Espinosa, what's going on? Thank you for coming through. The list is very short in terms of the guys that you would even put up with, as the greatest punchers of all time. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Deontay Wilder is probably the hardest puncher in boxing history. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. And yeah, I just blocked the homie. That's actually a really good friend. But yeah, now ain't the this ain't the place. And he was heckling. He means well. And he'll return when he behaves himself. But I think that Deontay Wilder with that right hand, we might have witnessed the hardest punch in boxing history. And let me know if you agree or disagree with that. Areola versus Ruiz, Wilder so yeah, okay. So you think Wilder KOs Andy Ruiz? Which is, I mean, it's certainly a strong possibility. Now, okay, Areola's pretty resilient. I would say Andy Ruiz has good punching power, not great punching power. But he's got fast hands. You know what? The more I'm thinking, now I'm just thinking out loud. But the fact that Andy Ruiz isn't going to just put you away quickly, it's like, how long can you hang around with Deontay Wilder without getting absolutely blasted? Yeah, and he dropped Ruiz. Areola dropped Ruiz, right? You can't hang around for 10, 12 rounds without getting hit, especially if you're a 6'3" fighter who's going to have to come in and collapse the pocket on Deontay Wilder. He's not slow either, right? He's got a pretty fast right hand. So yeah, I guess the more you kind of work out how the fight might look in your mind, it starts to become a little bit clearer that, yeah, there's probably a strong likelihood that Deontay Wilder wins that one via knockout. I think the part that makes it hard to picture is simply that that Andy Ruiz has never been knocked out. He got dropped by Anthony Joshua in the 3rd round, and he got dropped by Chris Areola. But isn't it kind of, it's kind of tough to picture somebody who's, you know, performed as well as much as we've seen Andy Ruiz just getting flattened. But Deontay Wilder, if anybody, is the guy that will do that to you. So yeah, I'd have to agree with that, you know, gut feeling there. If Wilder knocks out Joe Joyce with one punch, then he is okay. Yeah, because Joe Joyce seems to have one of the best chins that we've witnessed. And by the way, I think I would almost rather see Wilder versus Joe Joyce than Wilder Ruiz. I think if I was to err on wanting to see Wilder over Ruiz first, it's because Andy Ruiz is he's a former champion, and it's more historically significant. But Joe Joyce looked very unusual. I'll put it like that, against Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker's another guy. I couldn't picture Joseph Parker getting knocked out until I saw him get splattered eventually by Joe Joyce. So yeah, if I had to bet though, Deontay Wilder versus Andy Ruiz, right now I would go with Wilder via knockout. And same thing with Wilder versus Joe Joyce. I think I would go with Wilder via knockout there as well. Yeah, Wilder versus Joyce. The only difficult part of that is, you know, promotionally, yada yada. But yeah, the thing about the heavyweight division though is, heavyweight, unlike a lot of the other divisions, an appetite can be built for a fight to where it seems like promoters are more willing to work on these one-offs for, you know, special fights. I don't know if Wilder versus Joyce has risen to that threshold of being a special matchup yet. But if Joe Joyce, for instance, like beat an Anthony Joshua, of course, right? Or had another very, very significant win. Maybe if he, I don't know, knocked out a Dillian Whyte or something like that, and Wilder beats Andy Ruiz, then I could see a cross-promotional thing happening between Wilder and Joe Joyce. But by that point, unless it's Anthony Joshua that gets knocked out, I feel like the pivot for Deontay Wilder, if it's not Alexander Usyk, but you would expect that Fury versus Usyk would have already happened, you know, around the time that Wilder would be fighting Andy Ruiz. If it's not Usyk, you would think that Wilder and team would want to pivot and give Eddie Hearn a call, say, hey, you guys want to do Bomb Squad versus AJ? I feel like that would be a mega fight that I think the powers can finally come together and make that happen. It's really just a shame that they didn't make it happen 4 or 5 years ago. By the way, on the Shields versus Marshall undercard, yeah, QT, if Wilder beats Joe Joyce, I think he deserves the winner of Fury versus Usyk. Wow. Does Wilder really want a fourth fight with Fury, though? I, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. I know I wouldn't, but I'm not Deontay Wilder, you know? And I don't want that for Deontay Wilder. Not right now, at least. You know, go ahead and the thing is, Fury is still going to be 280 pounds. He's still going to be 6'9". The referee's still going to let him, you know, maul Deontay Wilder. He's still going to be a better technical boxer. It's just a terrible matchup. And it's really amazing that Wilder still put him down 4 times. But yeah, you know, I would rather see Wilder. Like, if I'm advising Wilder, I'd rather see Wilder fight Usyk or Anthony Joshua than a fourth fight with the Gypsy King right now. EK is in the house. What is going on? Thank you for coming through. And so on the Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall undercard, Alicia Bumgarner beat Michaela Mayer. Michaela Mayer was the favorite, but not like a huge favorite, but a significant favorite. This was to me, this was a closer fight than Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. And there was a lot of bad blood going into Mayer versus Bumgarner as well. The thing that surprised me is that Bumgarner had the edge in punches thrown and punches landed. I thought that her strategy was going to be make Michaela Mayer kind of stalk you and then selectively pick your spots to ambush. I didn't think she was going to be able to box with Michaela Mayer and throw, you know, tit for tat, basically to match Michaela Mayer in volume. I thought Michaela Mayer was more or less going to start controlling the second half of this fight with the jab, which, to her credit, Michaela Mayer had a stronger second half of the fight than she did the first half of the fight. But she didn't get into that. She didn't get into the flow that I thought she was going to get into. Like, I picked Mayer to edge a decision here. I picked Clarissa Shields to beat Savannah Marshall via decision. But with Mayer versus Bumgarner, Bumgarner in the first 3 rounds, I didn't expect her to win. Like at least win the first 2 rounds and then probably win 3 of the first 4 rounds. I didn't expect Bumgarner to get off to that sizable a start. And she was kind of coming forward in some of these cases, and she looked like she wanted to mix it up and to throw these combinations, like 3, 4, 5 punch combinations. This is truly a fight that I thought could have gone either way, but I do think that if somebody was going to edge the 6-4, like I wouldn't have opposed a draw. If it was a win for Michaela Mayer, I think I would have looked at it like, yeah, I don't agree with that one, but I could still rationalize it. And then obviously Bumgarner winning 6-4, I thought was slightly, again, a lot of swing rounds here, a few swing rounds, a few clear rounds and a few swing rounds, but I thought that the right call was 6-4 for Alicia Bumgarner. Now, if Marshall got the decision over Shields, I wouldn't have called it a flat-out robbery, but I don't think that the right person would have gotten that decision. I would have. I don't even know if I would have been totally cool with a draw, but I could stomach a draw there. But I think that the right person won that fight. But again, I thought Michaela Mayer versus Bumgarner was a little tougher to call. You know what surprised me about that fight as well? And it surprised me with, well, Alicia Bumgarner, she doesn't have great defense. But I was surprised that she was landing so many clean power punches on Michaela Mayer, who was, you know, the more experienced, the more technical fighter, the sweet scientist and all that. But I didn't see that much, more ring generalship. But maybe she did have the ring generalship, and that was maybe what offset the punching speed advantage for and power, but the punch speed advantage for Alicia Bumgarner. But like Michaela Mayer, she had a height advantage. I didn't think that she used that very effectively. but maybe that's a testament to how well Alicia Bumgarner was getting her shots off. Not only with like left hooks and straight rights, she was getting her jab off as well. But all in all, that was a pretty good fight. I agreed with Timothy Bradley that they both kind of left something on the table. It looked like the fight was kind of in the balance and for the taking in rounds 9 and 10. But I felt like the unlike Shields Marshall, in Mayor Bumgarner, I felt like the temperature kind of cooled in the 9th and 10th round to where there was a decrease in all-around punch volume from both of them to where you couldn't get mad if the decision went this way or that way, because in the 9th and 10th, it didn't look like either one of them really put their stamp on the round and claimed it with throwing and landing several effective punches. I thought that the 10th round was a little bit of a letdown, and it's just interesting when you hear the chemistry of the commentary, right? First of all, they were all broadcasting from different places. So you had Andre Ward broadcasting from his house, Timothy Bradley the same, and I think Mark Kriegel the same. But Timothy Bradley, sometimes his commentary is really like what he feels, and you could tell that Andre Ward is trying to kind of reel him in and saying, no, but this is like a technically brilliant fight. And then you'll hear Timothy Bradley saying, oh no, like they're not throwing enough punches. Like I need to see more action. Which it's not a one size fits all or paint with a broad brush scenario when it comes to the action. Sometimes you really do have sweet science fights that don't call for, guns blazing, so to speak. But I don't know. I still don't know how to interpret the 9th and 10th round between Mayer and Bumgarner. But hey, Alicia Bumgarner, she won the fight. And by the way, now she holds 3 of the belts in that division. The only other belt holder in that 130-pound division is going to be fighting tomorrow, believe it or not. Her name is Hyun-Mi Choi. She's originally from North Korea. She defected from North Korea to South Korea in like 2004. So now she obviously resides in South Korea. But that's the only other belt holder. So when asked, are you going to take a rematch against Michaela Mayer since this fight was so close? And Bumgarner said, oh, no, she's not getting a rematch. I did what I had to do. I'm moving on. I'm going to fight Choi. Well, that's assuming Choi wins tomorrow when she fights against Vanessa Bradford for, again, the only belt in the division that Alicia Bumgarner does not hold. So let's talk a brief moment about Caleb Plant versus Andre Dirrell, the brother, Anthony Dirrell, the dog. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a quick sip. Marco Rubio style. I don't know if you guys remember. But Caleb Plant versus Anthony Dirrell, that was actually one of the fights. I would put it in my top 3. Like I asked you guys, I think the beginning of last week, what fight do you want to see the most out of the 5 major fights that took place last weekend? Or this past weekend. Caleb Plant versus Anthony Dirrell, for me, was the top 3. And I think for Benji Tucker, I think you had said Plant Dirrell was your number 2 behind Shields Marshall. Is that right? JR, by the way, said that if the fight had been 12 rounds, Mayer would have pulled it away. It looked like, yeah, I could see that happening because she did have a better second half of the fight than the first half of the fight. And I also agree. Ventru, thank you for coming through, man. Heck yeah, good to hear from you. It was an amazing fight weekend, absolutely. And one more. EK said that even though AJ would 90% lose, you would give him 90% of losing to Wilder, to a healthy Wilder. We don't know how Wilder will be if the fight goes past 4 rounds. Yeah, we still don't know the totality of the damage and the age, right? For Deontay Wilder. Punch absorption, all of that. Due to the punishment that he took in the last two Fury fights, right? But yeah, we don't know. We know that Wilder still hits hard as hell, but we also know that he's got a quick deployment method, right? Like, it's not like a slow punch. This is a very fast and sharp punch, and it's coming from a 6'7" guy. And he did move around the ring well, at least in that first round. But you're right, we don't know how he would look going into the 5th, 6th, 7th round, let alone 8th and beyond. I agree with that. Yeah, so Edward Espinosa thought that Caleb Plant was pillow fisted. He surprised you and you're happy. Yeah. So, like, I didn't think Caleb Plant was pillow fisted necessarily. Brendan Jackson, salute. Thank you for coming through. Like, the thing with Caleb Plant is, I thought he was very, very good. Like, when he beat Uzcategui, who, by the way, looks like he's going to be David Benavidez's next opponent, Jose Uzcategui. So when Caleb Plant beat him for the title, dropped him twice in that fight, I'm looking at Caleb Plant and I'm like, damn, he looks like he might be one of the best fighters in this division. And keep in mind, we were coming off of the, prime Badu Jack. So we're talking, 168, right? So that would have been like James DeGale was a good fighter in the division, Badu Jack, and, there were a few. But the way that Caleb Plant looked like he had fast hands, high boxing IQ, which, first of all, when you're working with those two things in itself, you're already kind of a problem, right? Fast hands and a high boxing IQ. But also, he showed that quick reflex that can help you evade punches. By the way, Clarissa Shields showed that even when she was up against the ropes against Savannah Marshall. And I think some of that, and we're going to get into punch patterns and punch pattern recognition as we talk Plant versus Dirrell. But if you notice, when a fighter throws 1-2, 1-2, a lot of fighters already have the sense and they know to roll because of punch pattern recognition. When you tend to throw a fighter off, it's when you double up with one hand. That's why when you say jab, jab, or they'll say, double up on the jab, one, to close distance against a taller fighter, but also to kind of mystify them a bit with with going off pattern, we'll say, by doubling up with the same hand or even tripling up. Now, if you look at the knockout combination that Caleb Plant finished this fight with, he threw that left hook to the body of Andre Dirrell. Dirrell was then loading up on his left hook to respond to his left hook to the body, because what do people usually do when they get hit with something? They try to throw that same something back often, not always, but sometimes. So Andre Dirrell gets hit to the body with the left hook. He starts gearing up to throw the left hook of his own. But what happens? Caleb Plant hesitated for a second, kept his phone up. Dirrell didn't. That might have been, that was a big difference maybe. But he threw the left hook to the body. He didn't immediately go with the left hook up top. He hesitated for just like a millisecond. So he throws the hook to the body, waits. Then he explodes, really sits on the left hook up top, and he beat Anthony Dirrell to the punch. He got that delayed left hook up top off first. And again, it was punch pattern recognition. Anthony Dirrell was throwing his hook, but he was totally naked to get hit with Caleb Plant's left hook. He did not think that punch was coming. Not at all. Caught him so cleanly upside the head, and it was like, it was good night. And the reason I say I don't think Caleb Plant was pillow-fisted coming into this fight was he dropped Uzcategui twice, as he was claiming that IBF title. He knocked Mike Lee out, knocked Vince Feigenbutz out. I know, who cares, but the way that he did it when he was operating, he looked like a super good technical boxer with punching power. But as I said before, what surprised me is how elusive he also is. Like, Anthony Dirrell was having a lot of trouble landing cleanly. Like, he would hit him with some shots, but even the shots that he was landing, it looked like Plant was kind of rolling with. But the ones that he wasn't rolling with, he was kind of making Anthony Dirrell miss entirely. So he would duck some, he would pull back from some, he would move from some, he would block some. And I knew that he was a good defensive fighter, but I thought that he was only a good defensive fighter. Again, Uzcategui fight aside, I thought that he was more good because of the movement. Kind of like when he was fighting Canelo, like, hey, you're going to have to work to even catch me, let alone hit me, right? So if you're going to be moving and moving and moving, yeah, you're going to be tough to hit, but you're also not going to be super effective in the punches that you're landing because you're just on your bike the whole time. But Caleb Plant looks like he's showing some of that kind of, special defense where he doesn't have to just constantly be moving and then move away. Like, he could somewhat be in or near the pocket and still make you miss with his head movement and his trunk movement. So Caleb Plant, like y'all might still think that David Benavidez knocks Caleb Plant out. I've got to reevaluate this one. I really do. Like Caleb Plant, if he's healthy in the right hand, because that was my suspicion, is that maybe he's been battling a bum right hand. But I have to look at him versus David Benavidez with the new lens in light of this performance over Anthony Dirrell. Granted, Anthony Dirrell is 37 years old, and he's been in a lot of like very tough fights throughout several years. Let's see. QT said Plant retired Dirrell. Yeah, I think that's a high likelihood. No, not officially retired, unless you guys heard that he announced his retirement. I didn't hear an announcement, but I know that Dirrell was kind of half retired, even after he scored that knockout on the Canelo versus Plant undercard. He basically said if he can't secure a major fight, he's out. So we'll see what he says after this fight. I know he's given some commentary. I didn't see what he said in, like the fight hype video that they put up, I think the day after the fight. But I haven't heard an official retirement. I wouldn't be surprised if he either A, does retire, or B, maybe does one more fight against an easy-ish opponent, perhaps in his hometown. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to work out a whole fight card in or near Flint, Michigan, Detroit or another Michigan city. I don't know if they're going to be able to work that out, but I get the feeling that he would like to perhaps fight in front of his home crowd before retiring. So I would guess that maybe he would see if there's anything potentially that could be made to satisfy that. But if not, I wouldn't be surprised if the dog finally hangs it up. He really didn't look that good in this fight. He gave it a spirited effort, but I mean, it's not like this was like a good and even fight until the knockout came. It was an interesting fight. It was somewhat competitive, but I had Plant winning just about every round. What about you guys? I mean, I thought Plant was fully in control. He was hitting him. He was hitting him to the body a lot. That was another thing that impressed me about his game plan and his attack. And I think somebody mentioned that Plant will probably be going to the body in last week's live chat. But JR said he didn't give Dirrell one round. It would have been hard. It looked like he was reaching, and it kind of looked like he was kind of punching in water. You know what I mean? It looked like he was sort of pushing his long punches, and they just weren't getting there with the sharpness or the snap of, Caleb Plant's punches. Let's see. Yeah, QT said that I hope that he does retire. I don't want to see him get laid out like that again. Yeah. So Brendan Jackson, you still have questions about Caleb Plant's durability. So look, Canelo will test just about anybody's durability as far as we've seen in the 168-pound division. It's like if he's not knocking them out, he's breaking their orbital bone and they're quitting in the corner, or he's just bludgeoning them, like just what he did to Callum Smith, basically. So durability. Now, I think we were talking about this a little bit, where I think you were saying that when Caleb Plant gets late into fights, that he tends to fade. Is that right? Like he did even against Caleb Truax, a fight that he was clearly winning just about every round. He looked so unspectacular against Caleb Truax. But you know what? I tend to think, and this is just, again, my suspicion, I feel like he was injured in that Caleb Truax fight. And I feel like he just wanted to get out of the fight with a win and then recuperate, or just basically set up that Canelo fight. Like, it seems like something was off just because of how much taller than Caleb Truax he was, how easily he was controlling the fight, and the fact that he seemed unwilling to put those power punches together behind the jab. So I'm really wondering if Caleb Plant was 100% versus Caleb Truax. Let's see. Caleb Truax did kind of get to him towards the end with some clean shots. Yeah, I really don't know if it was truly a durability issue or an injury. But if it wasn't an injury, then yeah, we're right to suspect that there could be a durability issue. Which, if we know anything about David Benavidez, he seems to be like pretty durable, right? I mean, we haven't seen him get the hell beat out of him. I've seen him get dropped several fights ago. let me know who you guys think would win between Plant and David Benavidez. I'm curious because, again, I'm kind of re-looking at that one. But yeah, Caleb Plant looked like he was displaying all of the promise I thought he was showing basically in that Uzcategui title win for Caleb Plant. By the way, this coming weekend, it's not a great weekend of action. We've got Mauricio Lara versus Jose's, is it Jose? Or I think it's Luis San Martin. Now, San Martin has a few losses. His most recent loss, though, came like 4 years ago, or 3 to 4 years ago, and it was against Emmanuel Navarrete, who I consider to probably be the best in the division. But San Martin has like 5 losses. Only one was via knockout. That was to Emmanuel Navarrete. But since then, he's gone on a 7-fight winning streak. That's Mauricio Lara's next opponent this coming weekend. It looked like Mauricio Lara didn't want to wait for another Lee Wood opportunity. But I'm thinking like, damn, you better win this fight then, right? Because he was in line for a title shot. And I suspect that if he handles business against San Martin, which he's a big favorite, he's like a minus 900. So he's like a 9-1 favorite against San Martin. If he handles business here, I think that they're going to try to line up another big opportunity for him on the DAZN platform. Now, whether that comes against Lee Wood or if they do Lee Wood versus Leo Santa Cruz, which is one, well, I'm kind of thinking don't hold your breath. That's what I'm thinking, just because of the cross-promotional nature. And I'm so tired of them having to like remake and re-say, okay, it's going to be this fight. No, it's going to be Leo Santa Cruz versus Ray Vargas and Lee Wood versus Mauricio Lara. I just want them to make up their mind on what direction the division's going in. But again, if Mauricio Lara handles business here, I think that they're going to set up another big opportunity. And again, the other major-ish fight, not a major fight, but there is a belt on the line, is Hyun Mi Choi defending the only belt that Alicia Bumgarner does not hold in that division against Vanessa Bradford. So I think that if Choi wins, they're going to try to make the battle for undisputed between Alicia Bumgarner and the winner of Hyun Mi Choi and the challenger Vanessa Bradford. Oh, yeah, Brendan Jackson. Okay, so Jose Zepeda versus Regis Prograis, that is taking place next month. Here's the thing. Tell me if you've seen a flyer for that fight. I've heard the fight announced. I've heard the date given. I haven't seen the official launch of the flyer yet. Not that that's like the end-all be-all, but I look at that as being like, you know, the marketing legitimacy. Like, okay, they're starting to really push this thing, right? And if the fight does go down, which I so hope it does, for the vacant WBC belt, one of the 3 belts that Josh Taylor has had to give up in pursuit of that rematch versus Jack Catterall. I just froze for just a second. But if they do make that fight, I'm going to try to go to that fight. It's in Carson, California, not too far from here. Yeah, I've heard everything about Zepeda versus Prograis other than them making it official. So I'm kind of like, come on, guys. But here's what worries me about that fight. It's the result of the purse bid, right? So like what's it called? Like Marv Nation, Marv Boxing, Marvin Boxing, a newcomer to the boxing ecosystem in terms of being a legit promoter, right? I always worry about this. Just like if Triller says that they're going to do something, it's like, let's see it first, right? They couldn't stage Teofimo Lopez ultimately against George Kambosos. So because it's a newcomer to the game, I'm like, or like more recently, Tevin Farmer versus Mickey Bay. Like, did anybody tune into that fiasco? Like, that was one of the most embarrassing things I have seen in recent boxing history. And if people didn't tune in, I'm almost thankful that they didn't tune in. Like, the fight card actually went down. And as the fight card was taking place, it wasn't even announced. It was just understood little by little because the fighters announced it on social media while the fight card is taking place that the main event's not going to happen. So, again, with these new promoters, I just hope, because they kind of overbid for this fight. I think it was like multi-million. And the next highest bidder was like less than 50% of what they put up. I hope they're able to pay both fighters, you know, pay for everything that goes into the overhead of putting on a fight, and still maybe make a profit. I don't know. Like that, they put up a lot of money for that fight. It's one thing if Matchroom, you know, pays, you know, Regis Prograis a lot, to, you know, for the World Boxing Super Series, you know, when he beat Kirill Relic and then lost to Josh Taylor, that he made $1 million or more for a couple of those fights. So, yeah, I just hope that the fight happens because I have a lot of questions financially. I don't want to get, like, you know, too inside baseball, you know, beneath the surface on whether this fight's going to happen. But if it does, great for boxing. I'll believe it when I see the promotional machinations start moving forward, like this thing is really happening. Like when Dignity Health Sports Park, the venue that they say is going to be hosting this fight, when I see it on the venue's website, I'll believe it. You know, because they have to pay, like, you know, they have to pay to even lock in the date. So that's how I'll be like, you know, I'll start having more confidence that Zepeda Prograis is going to go down. But yeah, Brendan. Yeah, they had a low-key press conference on YouTube the other day. Damn. So here's the thing, like, did it just make it into your YouTube feed? Because I feel like most of the things that happen in boxing, it's gonna come across my feed because I feel like I'm following the right entities and I'm tracking the right channels and so forth. So the fact that, I mean, I wasn't even aware that this press conference happened if it was for Zepeda and Prograis. That's a little bit concerning, but at least they look like they are moving forward. That's good news. It's just a shame that a fight, that we know these fighters, Zepeda and Prograis, that a fight that is this elite is flying this far under the radar and is like so far out of the purview, out of, you know, away from anything that would even be anything less than a boxing enthusiast probably isn't aware of Zepeda versus Prograis. Oh, Fight Hub had it on. Okay. I'm going to go back and look at their channel. Yeah, thank you. So before we wrap up, guys, I want to just kind of reiterate some of the boxing news that recently broke. So it looks like Tyson Fury, Derek Chisora 3 is going to go down. I know. Boo, boo, boo. December 3rd looks like it's going to be the date. And yeah, Frank Warren has said that that's going to happen. And, you know, the big entities, you know, or the bigger news breakers, you know, the Michael Bensons, Mike Coppingers are making this one sound like it's near official. Fury versus Derek Chisora 3. Yeah, I agree, QT. Boo, boo. I mean, it would be one thing if they split the first two fights. Fury won both of them, won the second one, you know, via stoppage, and then they're having the third fight. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a stay busy fight, so is an elite fighter entitled to a stay busy fight between the good fights? You know, so if you fight like good fighter and good fighter, can you have like a stay busy fight in between? And if so, at least Derek Chisora is a quality stay busy fight. You know, it's like tell Joseph Parker that Derek Chisora is a stay busy fight. But even if Derek Chisora is a competitive fighter versus many good fighters, we still already know who's going to win that fight. And it doesn't help that Derek Chisora doesn't have like lights out power. He's got lights out work ethic, but that's not, you know, and heart, obviously, and chin often. But the fact that he doesn't have lights out power almost gives him no chance against Tyson Fury, especially because he's like, you know, in his late 30s now, he being Chisora in his late 30s. As I mentioned, by the way, Josh Taylor, I said this in the top of the hour, but Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall is reportedly now agreed to for February 4th. It feels like that's a long time from now. And I think that they had their first fight, wasn't that like last December? So it will have been like a year and 2 months that Josh Taylor has been out of the ring. I like Josh Taylor a lot as an elite fighter. I still have him in my pound-for-pound top 10. But man, I don't like to see that stretch of inactivity. And it's also unfortunate that he had to cough up the WBC, 3 of the 4 belts to finally make this Taylor versus Catarall 2 fight happen. In a fight that Josh Taylor was awarded the victory. Usually we see somebody pushing for something if they lost the first fight. But it's like, you know, to Josh Taylor's credit, it looks like this is a principled move that he's making. that he wants to totally settle the score and to leave no doubt against a guy who arguably beat him. And it makes me think that Josh Taylor himself kind of feels like he might have lost that first fight to Catarall. Yeah, Edward Espinoza said, Frank Sanchez, Joe Joyce, Jared Anderson, Andy Ruiz, like, why Chisora? Well, I think Frank Sanchez would be a tough matchup for Tyson Fury. Not to say that he wins, but he's like an undefeated, very, very good fighter. Yeah, I would definitely pick Frank Sanchez to beat Derek Chisora, for instance. So the answer to that one is I think Frank Sanchez is a lot better than Derek Chisora. Joe Joyce, obviously. So you're naming like really good fighters. So I'm almost of the belief that Tyson Fury truly wants to. Yeah, he fought against Carlos Negron. Yeah, you're right. And he won that fight via stoppage, right? Yeah, Frank Sanchez. I think he won that one via stoppage. But I think that Tyson Fury wanted an easier fight for this tune-up, so to speak. And then I think that in his next fight, I expect to see him fight Alexander Usyk. A lot of people don't think that he wants to fight Usyk. I don't think that he loves the idea of fighting Usyk, but I think that he understands the importance of it. I think he's gonna fight Usyk straight up. I don't know if Usyk's gonna take another fight in between, but it looks like since Tyson Fury is going to be fighting in December and, Usyk's going to be ready in February, then it's going to be a question of, does Alexander Usyk have to defend it against a mandatory, or will the powers that be allow him to just fight Tyson Fury next instead of fighting, Joe Joyce or another title contender? Another mandatory, should I say. Yeah. Knock the dude into the ropes like the setup for Rey Mysterio's 619, San Diego's area code. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, Frank Sanchez is a bad boy, and he's very technically sound. He's going to be a stylistic matchup for a lot of heavyweights. Again, in more news, David Benavidez versus Jose Uzcategui. That looks like it's going to take place in January. I expect more boos on that one. But, Uzcategui, if he is able to still operate at his best, which I've seen him less than his best since losing the title to Caleb Plant, it's a decent fight for David Benavidez. It's a decent one, right? I mean, until this past weekend, Uzcategui was still Caleb Plant's best win. Yeah, QT. Yeah, I agree. Troy Williamson versus Josh Kelly taking place on December 2nd. Josh Kelly was kind of like a hyped fighter, coming out of the UK. He was looking pretty good until he got beaten up and then stopped by David Avanesian way earlier this year. I think that was still this year. But yeah, that's going to happen December 2nd. John Ryder, the guy who just beat Daniel Jacobs and gave Callum Smith, gave him hell. A lot of people thought that he beat Callum Smith. John Ryder is about to fight Zach Parker, pretty much taking Demetrius Andrade's spot. Remember, it was supposed to be Zach Parker against Demetrius Andrade for the interim WBO 168-pound title. It looks like it's instead going to be John Ryder against Zach Parker. Dillian Whyte versus Jermaine Franklin. That fight is close to being made for November 26th. And then finally, Triple G versus, I forgot his first name. It starts with an E. It's like Esquivacao or something like that. But his last name is Falcao. Falcao. So this fight is being ordered by the WBA and the IBF as Triple G's his next mandatory fight. Falcao is a undefeated fighter at middleweight. And one of the guys he's fought is a pretty good fighter, Amosov, whose only losses, I think it's Asimov, whose only losses when he fought Falcao were to Billy Joe Saunders and Demetrius Andrade. And Falcao ended up being the only other guy to beat that Asimov. So Falcao's looking like a good fighter. He's got a decent knockout ratio, so he's got some pop. But he's going to be fighting Triple G. Falcao's much younger than Triple G. But you would still expect Triple G to handle business, but I don't know. Sometimes erosion happens fast. Triple G's now 40, so I'm going to take a close look at that one. And I don't know who I'm going to really pick to win it, just from a guessing prediction standpoint. but that's Triple G's next opponent. And then Arislandi Lara is supposed to fight the winner of those two. Yeah, Sanchez versus Usyk is a modern technical dream match. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, Brendan Jackson said you're sad and disappointed for Josh Kelly in that loss. So when he fought David Avanesian, you remember the headbutt that caused like a cut to Josh Kelly? It seemed like that messed him up for the rest of the fight. Not to say David Avanesian would not have won that fight anyway, but it just seemed like Josh Kelly was having a miserable time in there with David Avanesian. One, because of Avanesian's come forward style, but also because of that cut, and he was just leaking blood. And then he later got stopped by Avanesian. So he has since fought once, but this is going to be another step up for Josh Kelly against a pretty good fighter in Troy Williamson. I kind of feel like Troy Williamson is going to win this one. This is at 154, by the way. Josh Kelly was at 147. My early gut instinct says to go with Troy Williamson, but we'll see if Josh Kelly is nearly as special as people thought he might be, kind of, you know, given his slick style and so forth. Oh, Brendan Jackson, you are interested in Triple G versus Falcao. Yeah, Falcao, and let me know if I'm pronouncing that wrong, by the way, is a good and quality fighter. And I look at him as maybe being as formidable as Ryota Murata was, you know, going into that fight. Oh, really? Okay. Janabek was saying that Falcao was ducking him a couple of months back. Yeah, he's been kind of one of those, you know, insiders, you know, if you're one of those like people who are really just digging deep and into it. They know about Falcao, and he's one of those guys who people have a lot of respect for, but hasn't had a meaningful fight to showcase that ability, right? Not too dissimilar than Janabek just 1 or 2 fights ago. Before that started being a name that people would see pop up like, oh no, fight that guy, or, you know, being made a mandatory. So now, you know, Triple G is fighting a guy who there are a lot of middleweights who don't want to fight that guy. I'll put it like that. But yeah, I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. Again, this isn't one of the best weeks in terms of fights coming up this weekend. By the way, the following weekend got a lot of action that I can't wait to get into. I'm gonna be busy with a bunch of previews for sure over the next like few days. But I think that I'm gonna do a Lara versus San Martin preview probably on Thursday morning. You know, there's no belt on the line, and nobody really cares that he's fighting San Martin, you know. But I do think that there might be some wrinkles in this matchup. Like I rewatched, you know, the Navarrete versus San Martin fight, and I'm like, San Martin, you know, he is 31 years old, I think. Mauricio Lara is somewhat proven, but there are holes in his game, and there are vulnerabilities I think that can be exploited. Not only from a sweet science standpoint, but for somebody who just wants to come forward and blast. Because, you know, Navarrete and San Martin, they were banging. Like that knockout, it came in the 12th round. So this now, I would say Navarrete was winning, I would say 8 rounds to 3 when they entered the 12th round. And then Navarrete got the stoppage. He hit him, he hit him, and it was one of those where San Martin took a knee and just, you know, he got knocked down in the prior round. Then he got dropped again in the 12th round, took a knee basically, and just didn't get up. And he kind of like doubled over and stuff. But it was a mix. It didn't look like any one punch did it. It was more, you know, a Navarrete style accumulation, even though he just finished somebody with one shot to the body. But yeah, there are some things that make me want to do the Lara versus San Martin preview. But next week, there are going to be several big fights that we're going to get into, both in the chats and through the previews. So yeah, I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. I agree, Brendan Jackson. After Loma destroys Jermaine Ortiz, we might get Loma versus Haney. I'm very hopeful. And it looks, promotionally, it lines up. The only thing that I could see the only reason I could see it not happening is if Haney just has no chance of making lightweight again and decides to go up to 140. I mean, he looked a little skinny and scary stepping on the scale the day before this fight against Kambosos in the rematch. So I really wonder. I hope that he can still make lightweight for just one more fight. I'm just hopeful that that fight gets made. And then you could handle business at 140. Heck yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you QT, Brendan Jackson, Edward Espinosa, Stan Tucker, Benji Tucker, JR, Imajin, the one who was saying the thing about production. I'm gonna welcome him back to the next chat. Jay, and he's a big boxing fan. He was just messing with me. He just didn't know that I don't play. But yeah, that's my boy. I'm gonna probably hit him up after this chat. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you guys. Yeah, Edward Espinosa. Thanks again. EK, thank you for coming through. And I know Lisa Tucker, Eleanor Tucker, Ryan Cummins, Billy Tucker, Basso Man. Thank you again. Absolutely, Edward. Yeah, I can't wait to talk with you guys soon. In fact, oh, by the way, hit the like if you haven't. But I'm probably gonna cut from this and just get right into prepping for the Lara versus San Martin previews, and then start looking at next week's action. But yeah, sorry about that. I hope you guys have a great week, and yeah, enjoy the action that does take place this week. On some of these weeks, I like to watch a lot of old fights, whether it's from the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s. I kind of take these slower, weak opportunities to just kind of dive back into the history, or just kind of revisit some fights that I need to rewatch, or to watch some historic fights that I never have watched. So yeah, give that a shot as well. By the way, there is a great UFC card coming up this weekend as well. Damn, I might even want to do just a live chat on that, but it's a really good card. Check that out, in terms of like the actual fight card, and look at the championship fights that are going to be taking place there. It's pretty, certain pay-per-views aren't that good, for the UFC. Other ones are spectacular. This is one of the best ones of the year. I'll put it like that. But yeah, thanks again, guys, for tuning in, for talking shop, talking boxing with me, for lending, good insight, bringing up good points and all that. Until next time, I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.